distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to proceed with the ceremony for the signing of the sponsorship agreement on disaster preparedness and awareness between the General Secretariat of the Organization of American States and Amazon Web Services. We're going to proceed with the signing of the agreement. Mr. Jeff Kratz for Amazon will speak.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So good afternoon, all. First of all, on behalf of Amazon, we are very honored and humbled to be signing this agreement in conjunction with the Organization of American States. A tremendous amount of effort went into this agreement to bring us today, and I'd like to recognize all those individuals in the room that have contributed as we proactively think how we can help governments throughout the region be prepared for what may be next. One of the core elements of government is to go ahead and protect the safety of citizens. And through this agreement, we will go ahead and be proactively building on a long-standing relationship that we've had with OAS to assist governments not only with the latest technology that is out there for cloud services and more, but bringing global best practices of millions of active customers around the globe that are going ahead and deploying it. This past year, we went ahead and worked very hard on a joint cybersecurity initiative, an agreement we signed approximately a year ago to help governments from Chile to Argentina, Brazil, Honduras, Mexico, and more to prepare and defend the government's institutions in a connected world, bringing that expertise to many capitals so that they can go ahead and use not only the technology again, but the best practices. And that cybersecurity initiative is one that we will be continuing this next year. Today's agreement really focuses on the next evolution. And I was chatting with our wonderful folks from Mexico. It was about a year ago, actually, that the Mexico earthquake hit. And again, Amazon was very humbled to be able to help participate in the relief efforts, bringing not only technology to help mapping out via drones impacted areas so that the government could respond more rapidly, but also through our retail side to help provide the right humanitarian assistance so that Mexico could quickly go ahead and recover. It's those types of areas that we are proactively now embarking on a new relationship. One that'll go ahead and focus on helping governments not only leverage technology and cloud, from Internet of Things technology, drone mapping areas, big data sets, and more, but also engaging in humanitarian relief efforts, coupled with having teams with the expertise that can go ahead and deploy in a rather rapid fashion as governments go ahead and recover, no matter what that disaster may be. So I'm humbled on behalf of the organization to go ahead and sign this agreement. It's one that the organization is very committed to the success not only of OAS, but of all the governments that are a part of this association, and to build on multiple years of a very positive relationship with the organization. So, Mr. Secretary General, thank you for that opportunity.
The Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, will speak.
Thank you very much. Preparing for and responding to disasters is of critical importance to the people of the Americas. By signing this agreement today, we aim to join forces with Amazon to help our member states to mitigate and address the impact of disasters in our region. I am pleased to be joined be joining Jeff Kratz, General Manager and Regional Head of Latin America, Canada, and Caribbean, Amazon Web Services USA, in signing this important sponsorship agreement. Through this agreement, the OES and Amazon will collaborate in supporting the disaster resilience building efforts of member states on as requested basis. Among other things, the OES and Amazon propose to partner in the research and publication of white papers on resiliency and business continuity, and in assisting member states in their disaster preparedness, response, and rehabilitation efforts. This is the second such partnership agreement that the OES is entering into with Amazon Web Services, following an agreement on cybersecurity. I believe that the OES must continue to broaden its outreach with the private sector, especially in this critical area of disaster resilience. We know from hard and often painful experience that disasters have multiple impacts. They can disrupt development. And as we know, development is not the business of government alone. Business are key partners in the development process. But in impacting development, disasters impact people. Disasters can claim lives and severely disrupt livelihoods. Many businesses draw their labor and their markets from the communities in which they are located. And so when businesses are affected, so too are communities and vice versa. And so business resilience and community resilience go hand in hand. Many of the same principles and plans that business use to prepare their operations to survive extreme events can be applied to community resilience efforts. Experience shows that a stronger business and a stronger communities translate into stronger bottom lines for both governments and business. This reality places a responsibility on business to treat the resilience of host communities as part of their own resilience efforts. Against this background, I view this agreement with Amazon with great optimism. Amazon's business model and its global reach and impact are universally recognized. I'm confident that through this agreement, member states will benefit from Amazon's advanced management expertise, its financial aptitude, and its technological and logistical know-how. In closing, I wish to commend all those who played a part in making this agreement a reality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This ceremony has concluded. I think you have another panel now.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, Luis is also the one who will be working with us on big data, so just so that you are aware. So that I was just telling you the program.
Big data analytics is one that who would take the corporation I look forward to that.
This is the micro.
And para
Buenas tardes. El acuerdo cuya firma acabamos de testimoniar, sin duda alguna, es un ejemplo muy ilustrativo de esas nuevas modalidades de trabajo en las que debemos incursionar todos para encontrar soluciones, dar respuesta a muchas de las necesidades que hemos estado planteando, en particular todo lo que tiene que ver con la prevención de desastres. Y en este caso es la evidencia de cómo la tecnología, la cobertura en el alcance y accesibilidad hacia las ciudadanías y hacia las instituciones públicas puede perfectamente permitirnos alcanzar esos objetivos y esos resultados transformacionales, en este caso para protección de nuestros ciudadanos en caso de desastres. Quisiera dar en este momento la palabra al señor relator, a la señora relatora, para que nos introduzca el panel 3 de la novena sesión plenaria de esta jornada. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Good afternoon, fellow panelists and esteemed representatives of the member states. I am honored to moderate this afternoon's panel on multi-stakeholder partnerships for building resilience in the region. I'm here on behalf of the Pan American Development Foundation, PADF, as you may know it. Partnerships are in our DNA. We've been founded by the OAS in 1962 to build partnerships with the private sector and engage them in disaster response, among other sectors in development. And since 1999, PADF has been a part of the Inter-American Committee on Disaster Reduction. Today, we're here to discuss how to build resilience in the Americas through multi-stakeholder partnerships. We will be exploring together first what resilience looks like and what are some examples of multi-stakeholder partnerships. Our discussion will be grounded in two key frameworks. The first is the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, particularly SDG number 17, which highlights the importance of global partnerships. And the second is the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. This is also aligned with the OAS goal to support member states in their effort to advance the commitments made under COP21. Why does resilience matter? As you heard it earlier from Mr. Secretary General, stronger communities mean stronger bottom lines. It just makes sense economically. And businesses and communities partnering go hand in hand. During the last decade, the cost of disasters in the region has increased dramatically, affecting 67 million people in the region. The region of the Americas includes some of the world's most vulnerable countries to natural disasters, such as Haiti, where I reside, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But resilience is just not built just within vulnerable countries. As you saw in 2017, the hemisphere reported economic losses that covered 88% of all disasters worldwide. We believe that partnerships across sectors will help build resilience in our communities to face future adversities. Partnerships can take different forms, but are built on shared values, a shared vision, and trust. At PADF, we partner with local organizations, with local authorities, public and private sector, to foster innovative local solutions to support communities to become resilient and particularly self-reliant. For example, in Haiti, where I work, PADF and Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines and the community of Labadie in the north have joined together to address basic community needs such as water, sanitation, and energy. For decades, PADF has worked with municipalities and local communities to build collaborative platforms from which they address their basic needs and access to basic services. And this is in rural and urban areas. Through such partnership, PADF is working to end disaster vulnerability in the region. Our objective for this session is to explore innovative approaches for scaling up cooperation, increasing resource mobilization, and leveraging the benefits of multi-stakeholder partnerships, specifically for building resilience in the Americas. With our panelists, we'll be highlighting opportunities and challenges in scaling up successful public-private partnerships to build resilience. We are pleased to have with us 7 distinguished panelists representing the public and private sector. Their expertise covers technology, aviation, hydrometeorology, insurance, disaster response, mitigation, and urban resilience. We have representatives from multilateral agencies, and they are Mr. Jeff Kratz from Amazon Web Services USA, Daniel Carlson from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Noaa, USA, Mitchell Fox from the International Civil Aviation Organization, Canada, Mark Forney from the World Bank, Isaac Anthony from the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, Andrew Slayton from FEMA, and Raul Delgado from the Inter-American Development Bank. We'll start with our first question. To begin, I'd like to ask our panelists if you could share with us your experience with multi-stakeholder partnerships, building resilience, or both. Tell us about models for partnerships that you have seen. And we'll start with Mr. Isaac.
Thank you, Madam. Okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator, fellow panelists, distinguished representatives. Indeed, the organization that I represent, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, CRIF for short, was actually built on successful multi-stakeholder partnership. CRIF provides disaster risk insurance to countries in the Caribbean and more recently in Central America. And it's really one of those entities that also seeks to promote climate resilience. More specifically, the CRIF seeks to provide quick liquidity in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. And that is where the real value proposition of the CRIF lies, so that countries can have the necessary resources in order to be able to recover as quickly as possible. But I emphasize the importance of multi-stakeholder partnership. For one, when CRIF was started, it came as a result or in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Ivan in the year 2004, when with a particular event that devastated a number of countries in the region, including Grenada and the Cayman Islands. That really was a wake-up call for a number of those governments who sought the assistance of the World Bank to establish some form of disaster risk financing facility. So the assistance was sought from the World Bank, and the World Bank in turn used its considerable convening power to enlist the assistance of a number of donors, including the government of Canada, the UK, France, Ireland, the Caribbean Development Bank, to raise the required resources necessary to be able to capitalize what has now come to be known as CRIF SPC. But in addition to that, it was also necessary to get support from the private sector. Again, what we saw coming through was a particular type of public-private partnership where a lot of the skills lied in the private sector. So we were able to engage a number of what you call service providers to provide different services to the CRIF. In addition to this, we've also been able to get the support of the reinsurance community, because when CRIF was started, it was seen as a new type of facility. It never been experienced before. In fact, it's actually the world's first multi-country risk pool. And so when we started off, some of the reinsurers were not sure that they wanted to participate in this sort of activity. So they eventually came on board. And so in order for CRIF to have been successful, we needed to get the support of the reinsurance community. But then we were able to enter into a number of partnerships, certainly within the region. For example, earlier on, you heard from the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which again is one of our key partners in terms of implementing technical assistance. We also have the Caribbean Community Center for Climate Change. We do have a memorandum of understanding with that entity. We also have the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, which is CIMH, the University of the West Indies in terms of supporting the CRIF, in terms of helping to build capacity throughout the region. So we provide a lot of training, a lot of scholarships to a number of people in the whole area of disaster risk financing and management. And of course, we have the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and the Association of Caribbean States. All these entities, CRIF, we do have memorandums of understandings. So we see this as a very good example of multi-stakeholder partnership at work, working to help to strengthen disaster risk management and also to foster climate resilience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. So leveraging private sector knowledge to develop mechanisms for sustainable financing in the face of adversity is what we heard about today. And I'd like to turn to Mr. Fox for some examples from the aviation sector.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Nadia, and good afternoon, distinguished representatives. First, just a real quick brief on what ICAO is. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations, and we're responsible to foster the safe, secure, sustainable, and orderly development of international civil aviation. You might wonder why a single sector is coming to you today. As was mentioned, the Americas are particularly vulnerable to natural disasters. And in particular, for small island developing states, aviation is literally a lifeline. So following a disaster, the humanitarian relief efforts are almost entirely dependent on having an aviation sector that can function, but it cannot function in isolation. So let me cite one example of where the coordination and the multi-stakeholder partnership didn't work as intended and what we can do as an example on the way forward. The tragic earthquake, and I'm sorry to bring that up, Nadia, in Haiti, was an example where quite literally the aviation system broke down. On an international level, there wasn't a sufficient amount of coordination going on between the government, between multiple stakeholders, and lots of well-intended communities that wanted to help. So the airspace around the airport, around Port-au-Prince, we were able to open that up, but the airport itself had limited ramp space, and we had lots of well-intentioned people coming in, both with commercial flights, but also private flights. We had quite a bit of what we call unsolicited bilateral donations. There was no system for prioritizing the flights into Haiti. Consequently, as those flights arrived and it started to fill up the ramp space, and it started to fill up the ramp space with supplies, humanitarian relief supplies, some that were very necessary, some that were unnecessary, there was no way to sort this out from a logistics standpoint. So, in effect, the humanitarian relief universe on an international level and the aviation universe didn't quite come together. So where can it work a little bit better? Following the hurricanes last year, almost a year ago, or a little bit more than a year ago, Maria and Irma, by chance, I had made a contact with the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So it's bringing two universes together. But it was just a personal relationship where we had a dialogue. That started to build from there, and I got a email just prior to those hurricanes going through from OCHA saying, can you tell us what airports are open and closed? And this is an example where multi-stakeholders can complement one another in such a synergistic way. OCHA is responsible for dispatching what we call UN disaster assessment and coordination teams. Those teams are supposed to be on the ground in an affected area within 48 hours of a disaster so that they can start to coordinate the humanitarian actors who will be on the scene providing search and rescue, providing supplies. Now, from the standpoint of the humanitarian community, it was almost impossible to find out what airports were open and closed. We have that information every 30 minutes through a big server in the sky. And because we had that information at hand and we started to draw those connections, we were able to get the UNDAC teams either to the states that were most badly affected in time, or at least close to the states where they could find alternative means of transportation to the other states. This has led to the formation of a truly multi-stakeholder collaboration. So just last month, under the auspices of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, a multi-stakeholder group met in Montreal. We call it the Focus Task Force on Airport Efficiency in Times of Natural Disasters. And some of the initiatives that we've started to undertake with this multi-stakeholder group, which, by the way, it involves the UN OCHA, it involves the World Food Program, it involves something called the Logistics Cluster, it involves the academia for some research that we don't currently have in place, and it involves the entire aviation community, including the industry. So the International Air Transport Association, the Airports Council International, we're all joining arms because we know that the multi-stakeholder efforts are absolutely essential. So some of the things that we're going to be looking at, and we have an action program to work forward on, is improving sudden onset notification so that across the sectors we're aware of what the needs are on a more timely basis. There's a platform for that. It could be improved. We're looking at ways to improve that platform. Prioritization. If you have 20 flights coming at the same time, some with high priority shipments, some with lower priority shipments, if there's no coordination going on between the aviation sector and the humanitarian sector or the National Disaster Management Authority, things really break down. In aviation, we have a system that our air traffic controllers can use to actually authorize flights to operate, but it requires a connection between those communities. Thanks to one of the large air freight operators in the world, DHL, they've developed a program called Get Airports Ready for Disasters. Now, that has been implemented in some of the states within the Americas, but it's not been widely used, and it hasn't really been vetted by the aviation industry, the rest of the industry. So we're looking at ways to improve upon Get Airports Ready for Disaster and to provide that level of assessment and training to airports throughout the Americas. What's that all about? It's about following a disaster, transitioning an airport which is well geared to receive regularly scheduled traffic into a logistics hub, a staging point for humanitarian relief. Mention resilience, and resilience in aviation is something that's extremely important. If I were to further define resilience, it's when the wrong things come together that are unanticipated. Is the system resilient enough to change its operations, change its modus operandi to adapt to unforeseen circumstances? So we're working to identify where there are vulnerabilities in the air transport system and how can we build resilience. Some of that resilience is in the infrastructure, making sure that the infrastructure is built to code, or relocating infrastructure that is in particularly vulnerable locations. We've put a project proposal forward, and we're looking for further support and partnerships to do that by. And we're engaging with the academic community, because identifying where those vulnerabilities, whether they're statistically prone to cyclones or hurricanes or earthquakes, these are something where we need to pair up with the community. And also something we call contingency plannings to make sure with the airline community that we have that ability. So to advance these things, and one of the shortcomings that we found in our own aviation sector is that so frequently aviation is sort of assumed that it will always be there, that the airports will always be open, that the airlines will always operate. And that's not always the case. So the coherence between national development plans and your aviation development plans, and the coherence between your emergency response plans and those plans as how they engage with your aviation system is something that we feel that's essential.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. So we've heard firsthand of examples of how sharing knowledge among different types of organizations and different capacities can actually save lives. So thank you for that. And we'll turn it to Mr. Slayton from FEMA to hear more about some examples of how FEMA has responded through partnerships, multi-stakeholder partnerships. And
very good. Thank you, Madam. Good afternoon, esteemed delegates. It's an honor to be here with you this afternoon. What I hope to share with you today is a special project initiative that FEMA has started down in Puerto Rico. As you know, 2 days ago, we recognized the first anniversary of the fall of Hurricane Maria on Puerto Rico and the resulting devastation to the island, to its people, and the total destruction of so much of the infrastructure on the island. And what I'm going to share with you really is just the latest step in about a 13-year evolution going on in emergency management in the United States. 13 years ago, we were impacted by another major hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, that devastated the Gulf Coast. And let me see if I can get to the first one there. There we go. Okay. There. C'est bon. At that time, the prevailing theory in emergency management in the United States was that there was a role for government to play in providing for the safety and welfare of its people, and there was a very firm black line between what the government did and what the private sector did. There was very little interaction between the two. Private sector was just sort of an afterthought in U.S. government disaster planning. Following Katrina, there was a sea change here in the U.S. in that we recognized that, quite honestly, the private sector was integral and critical to the ability of a nation to respond to a disaster and to recover from it. Right after Katrina, we published the National Response Framework, which was the first time where we clearly articulated that disaster response, disaster recovery is everybody's business. There's nobody outside of the scope of responding to disaster. Whether you're an individual, whether you're a corporation, whether you're a local, state, federal government, whether you're a private organization, a church, a synagogue, you're all involved in it, and we all have roles to play. And the National Response Framework articulated that. So for the last 10 years, we've been working with the private sector to bring them into the highest levels of U.S. government planning and preparedness to really prepare for catastrophic disasters in the U.S. But what happened a year ago and 2 days in Puerto Rico really called for a level of engagement with the private sector that we, quite honestly, had never envisioned. The devastation on the island, everyone's very aware of the level of destruction on the island, the impact on the infrastructure, the lifeline systems in Puerto Rico. As we responded to it and have been responding to it, we recognized early on that it really was going to take a very intimate partnership between the private sector and the federal government to be able to rebuild the island of Puerto Rico. Quite honestly, we were confronted with the challenge of a state government that in and of itself was one of the key victims of the storm. And what, you know, aside from any of the fiscal challenges they faced before the storm hit, the federal government had to come in and really help to support the state government as it addressed the needs of its own people. One of the things that the U.S. Congress asked FEMA to do early on was, as we were responding and trying to bring in aid from the mainland to the U.S., and to be honest, just to recall, we had already gone through 2 major hurricanes within a few months prior to that on the mainland. So our forces and our resources were stretched rather thin. But as we responded to Puerto Rico, Congress asked FEMA to work with the governor to begin to put together a national recovery plan on how we would rebuild the island and build an island that would be a model for not just Latin America or the Caribbean, but really for the whole world. So in mid-August, the governor's plan was released to Congress. It's online, it's readily available. But it's a rather challenging and ambitious project because we're projecting that it will cost $139 billion to rebuild Puerto Rico to the level that they deserve, that the people of Puerto Rico deserve. It's calling for an 11-year intensive program by the U.S. government, but I think that's maybe a bit ambitious. I would say it's more like 15 to 20 years is what it's going to take. But of that $139 billion price tag, the federal government is going to only provide around $95 to $100 billion. There's a $30+ billion delta for Puerto Rico. That has to come from the private sector. So I was dispatched to Puerto Rico about 3.5 months ago to create and start what we call the Hub of Philanthropic Engagement. And the idea was, as you all know, every time there's a major disaster around the world, the foundations, whether they be corporate, whether they be private or humanitarian, do a phenomenal job of responding to the impacted area. and providing aid in times of response. But it's natural that with the passage of time, that attention tends to wane and it begins to drop as other events around the world happen or just as time goes by. And this is what has happened in Puerto Rico. There was a lot of philanthropic investment sent to the island early on, not as much perhaps as some of the others, as you can see here on the mainland. But now, when I first went to Puerto Rico, it was 10 months after the storm, and that attention had moved on. Hawaii was dealing with volcanoes, California was dealing with wildfires, and so our thought was, let's create a special unit within FEMA that will become a partner with the philanthropic world. And so that's what I was sent down to Puerto Rico to create. And I created the Hub of Philanthropic Engagement. And the whole idea is very simple. It's to bring Puerto Rico back to the eyes of the donor world, wherever that is, and that's global, international, it's on the mainland here in the U.S., it's corporate, it's private, it's philanthropic, but the idea is that there are a lot of needs on the island that are going to need to be met by private sector money, and the challenge, probably from a funder perspective, is that they don't know who to talk to. They don't know who to trust. There is a bit of a trust factor in Puerto Rico because of the challenges with government fiscal mismanagement. So the unit is created to be able to bring together the funder community and the service provider communities. We've spent a year developing a very detailed idea of what opportunities exist on the island. And again, through the hub, what we'll be able to do is leverage that information so that a corporation, a foundation, can use its money wisely, and it's not using money it doesn't need to use where U.S. government money is going to pay for. So again, it's a long-term experiment on our part. We're looking at the hub working for the next 10 to 15 years. We'll be meeting with anyone, and we're always looking for new friends, Mr. Frack, and I look forward to saying hello to you after the panel. But hopefully, again, 10 years from now, I can come back and I can share some success stories with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slayton. Thank you, Mr. Slayton, and thank you for sharing this great initiative with the panel and the representatives. And we've heard from aviation, so we'll turn it now to Mr. Carlson to talk about Noaa.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you to my fellow panelists and designated representatives here today. It is a nice honor to be here speaking with you this afternoon. Noaa, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as many of you may be familiar with, our mission for primarily with our weather service function, our National Weather Service Bureau, has since its inception been focused on the preservation of life and reducing the loss of property. That has been at the core of NOAA's mission and our weather service function since the agency was stood up in the early 1970s. And over those years, we've made tremendous investments in our capability to provide the information and the forecasting function to improve how far out we can get information on potentially hazardous and extreme weather events. We've built and developed new satellite technologies, radar technologies, capabilities that we know have brought significant accuracy and timeliness for providing warnings for significant weather events. However, during those years of investments, we continue to see losses occurring. NOAA has, and the nation in particular, continues to see a 3- to 4-fold increase for losses related to hydro and meteorological events. So the focus now has started to shift from, we're putting in the resources for the technology, but how can we actually start to reduce the number of those losses and help drive some societal change? And I'm going to jump ahead here in my presentation instead of the full length of where I had intended initially to go, because I want to stick with the stakeholder aspect, the multi-stakeholder aspect to this discussion today. And that is the effort that we've done to develop what's called the Weather Ready Nation Initiative. And Noaa has rolled out this initiative about 4 or 5 years ago. And the real purpose behind this Weather Ready Nation initiative has been to develop a national movement for weather readiness, to engage stakeholders at every level, from private citizens to non-governmental organizations, local communities, and the private sector, who all have a role in how communities respond to significant weather events. So the Weather Ready Nation Initiative has been leading primarily through public and education initiatives to help improve that response. And the goal here is that we're trying to drive citizen awareness for significant weather events so that citizens know how and when to take action. We're primarily doing that, like I said, through a number of public education initiatives, through developing new communications and outreach capabilities. We've worked closely with FEMA and our national warning distribution capabilities. Cell phones now have the ability to provide alerts and warnings for your specific location for where a significant weather event may be happening, whether that's a tornado or other severe storm. And in particular, we're also looking at driving a key component to the Weather Ready Nation Initiative. It's called the Weather Ready Ambassadors, and where we're actually empowering government or non-governmental organizations, the local communities, private sectors to become ambassadors for the Weather Ready Nation Initiative. Noaa now has over 1,000 of these organizations that work with the National Weather Service to develop response plans at their local communities. Communities are now becoming tsunami ready, storm ready. We're working with sports organizations across the country to ensure that when there's a sporting event taking place, that even that stadium has the ability to respond to those types of for severe weather events that are moving in. That there's an awareness even within the operations and the management of that game on that day, that they're able to provide the appropriate information to the spectators. We have found this to be a tremendous success, a tremendous initiative that as we continue to roll out and developing this Weather Ready Nation initiative. And we are now seeing a large increase in the number of international interest in the Weather Ready Nation initiative. Our lead ambassador at National Weather Service headquarters I spoke with him before I came here, and we're certainly willing to engage with any nations who also wish to avail and implement this type of system. So anyway, that's sort of the one area I wanted to focus on given this topic about our Weather Ready Nation initiative. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlson, and it's a great example of how you partnerships with local communities and using technology to advance the resilience of local communities can lead to results. And I know firsthand that that's very impactful. We even have examples in Haiti. We wish we had more technology to share with our communities. So I know that in the example of Haiti, this would be very, very welcome. Thank you, Ken. And we'll turn to Mr. Mark Forney from the World Bank to talk about some examples of how multilateral agencies in disaster have worked with governments and communities to leverage resilience. Please.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity to come here and to make a few remarks about how we try to engage in multi-stakeholder engagement. I think within the World Bank, there's an increasing understanding of the impact, but also the limitations of financing. And the total aggregate amount of resources that the World Bank has as a lender is increasingly less of a proportion of the overall lending going to infrastructure financing and to development financing. And so I think where we start with the program I lead, which is called the CIDI Resilience Program, we start with a sense of humility about the resources that we have, and we try to think about our other strengths that we can leverage, such as our convening power. And just to put that in perspective, what does that really mean? That our resources as a multilateral development bank, just like the other multilateral development banks, is fairly limited. Well, about 7 years ago, one transaction for one company in Brazil to finance one project raised $60 billion of equity in a single day. And then 3 weeks later, a debt transaction for the same company raised $70 billion in a day. So within 3 weeks, one company for one project in one country raised $130 billion. That's essentially what the World Bank lends in 3 years. So I think understanding what our level of financing actually is and what kind of impact that can be made with the amount of financing that we have is really important to be humble with what we can do. And to build partnerships, we equally, all of us need to be a bit more humble in terms of what our comparative advantages are and how, by working together, the sum of our parts would be less than, the sum of the parts is greater than each part. And I just want to give a couple of examples of what that means and what the impact has been from different parts of the world that aren't necessarily just Latin America. In Nepal, after the earthquake in 2015, within 2 weeks of the event, 4 different financial institutions worked in partnership with the government under the leadership of the government to develop a single housing reconstruction platform. So you had the World Bank, JICA, USAID, and the Swiss that came together to commit financing and technical expertise to provide support through one window. And by being able to provide support through one window of engagement and working in partnership 2 weeks after the disaster happened until today, and that's work that will continue for a few more years, makes it much easier to convene additional actors in the different organizations that are working at the community level, because what they see at the national level in partnership with government are institutions that are working together, not competing with one another. And by setting the example of collaboration in a single platform, while ensuring that the government is taking a leadership role in structuring that platform and moving forward with investment, this is what we've seen to be more effective than other instances where each of the large financial institutions are in parallel dialogues with the government, because fundamentally the total impact of the interventions is less because of the limited value, financial value of the interventions. And because the government is distracted across different initiatives that creates significant transaction costs on their side. So again, by being humble, by convening and focusing on convening power that the different institutions have, and by working behind the government, we can not only convene ourselves to provide uniform support, which reduces transaction costs for government, but we can show a leadership example to the local community actors that we aren't as effective sometimes in engaging as we should be to move towards one platform. And then a second example to give is in Sri Lanka, where the country experiences very significant flooding on quite a regular basis. And to be able to confront that challenge, again, the World Bank partnered with JICA, with AIIB, and with AFD to develop an upstream plan with both the Ministry of Finance and 2 of the key line ministries in the government far upstream to identify investments and tranche out those opportunities for each financial institution. So instead of having 3 different master plans for basin level investments, that was what was happening in absence of an agreement for partnership, we had one, which meant that there was less discussion across different agencies, less confusion on the part of the government, and an ability to move forward in a single direction with financing and with a bigger vision delivered by the counterparts themselves. So again, in this case, we had strong government leadership to convene the different financial institutions. We had single analytical platforms and investment planning platforms to be able to prioritize that financing. And perhaps as a third piece and most important piece, we started working more upstream than we usually do. Because once we get into discussion with the government about a specific lending operation, then we need to move forward as we promise and as we agree to deliver that operation, and we aren't able to be given the space to partner more effectively. So by moving more upstream, moving a year of planning in advance before we start to agree on investment packages and projects, then we have that space with sufficient leadership from the government. And oftentimes in Latin America, this would be the case when the financing requirements outstrip any financial institution. So recently in August, we approved a portion of the Bogota Metro in partnership with the IDB. And this partnership comes about in large part because of the scale of the financing gap and the financing need, which mandates almost a need for the institutions to work together. And it's the realization, again, that by working together and partnering on large investment programs, we can help our clients in cities and governments around the world be more ambitious in achieving their objectives. Oftentimes this isn't the case, and oftentimes we find ourselves in competition. And a couple of the reasons for that competition are first and foremost the delivery period that we have. And if we're too downstream in the delivery period, it's inevitably going to lead to competition. A second element of that is the leadership on the side of the government to put up a larger vision of investment packages to achieve a larger objective than one-off projects. And so if we have these 2 enabling factors, we can continue with more of a sense of humility, with a design and a desire to bring in different projects that aggregate out to a more ambitious program that ultimately helps us work effectively together.
Thank you, Mr. Forney. And as international flows to the Americas, to the region, decrease, I think it becomes even more important that these consolidated cooperations can lead to self-reliant governments and cities. Thank you. And we've heard about how technology has helped build awareness. Mr. Kratz, what are some other examples of how technology can help build these multi-stakeholder partnerships and resilience in particular?
There we go. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to start actually with the prior panelists. I'm humbled to go ahead and be here and represent the company and so many wonderful organizations, customers around the table and more. And to be thinking about how technology can go ahead and not only help respond in times of needs, but also to go ahead and help take the proactive steps in advance to prepare as a part of that. At Amazon, we listen very closely to what our customers are asking. And as our business has gone ahead and grown, not only in our retail side, but also in our cloud services and technology side very rapidly, it means we're listening a whole lot more as a part of that process. We obsess over what our customers are asking for. And as we look at that to go ahead and inspire us to innovate on behalf of a global community, it's coming up with practical solutions, technology, logistics expertise, and more, so that we can very quickly respond, either directly, for instance, as was cited with Puerto Rico earlier, redirecting our Primaire fleet to bring humanitarian supplies to Puerto Rico after that, or in the times when we have our customers on retail wishing to make donations, mobilizing a larger group of individuals to go ahead and be able to donate items during a recovery time. it's not only been directly as well as helping mobilize others, but it's very much working in concert with many other organizations, non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, as well as engaging those other technology partners to go ahead and help provide solutions. I'll mention two very brief scenarios by which that occurred. Last year during the hurricane season, together with international organizations such as the Red Cross, as well as our partner community, there was a very big need to set up a call center to be able to respond to all of the inbound requests for assistance and more. Together with one of our Amazon partner network organizations, they were able to set up a call center within 48 hours so that the nonprofit organizations and governments could just respond. Now, setting up a call center usually takes 4 to 6 months to go ahead and occur. And not only were we able to go ahead via bringing other partners in to help the organizations do that, but the wonderful part was after the disaster period passed, they were able to then use technology and turn it off. Not to go ahead and have all that undifferentiated hardware and equipment there just waiting for the next one. Something we're able again to have technology be able to rapidly be deployed to help organizations solve critical needs at that time, responding to citizens' inquiries. But that's on the response side. Let me share one country that's been proactive. And this one's personal, because it was one that started with me in a conversation with Prime Minister Harris of St. Kitts. It was approximately a year ago. He and I were speaking in Toronto. We had some time together. And he said, Jeff, I don't want to go ahead and be always responding when hurricanes come through our area. How do we go ahead and have continuity of government? How do we help preserve all of the information of my citizens and more? Help us take technology and bring it to government on behalf of citizens. We began thus a dialogue. And I'm happy to say now that we've worked very closely with the government of St. Kitts to not only help modernize all of their websites, so in the case of one of the hurricanes coming over the island, they can have continuity of government. They can leverage cloud services to communicate with all of their citizens, both those that are on the islands, but those also that are global, asking what's going on. We've also been able to take the latest technologies and push it out to the edge, where they have devices, they're called Snowball, about the size of a very large Toomey suitcase outside of their data center, that in case the hurricane takes passing towards the island, that's one of the last things that boards on top of the airplanes out, so that then they can have the latest information on government be available, again, via cloud services and devices that go ahead and assist, taking a proactive role in helping not only a government to respond afterwards, but having continuity of government, reaching a global community of their citizens and more. These are just two of many examples. And as we look at the agreement that we just signed, what we're now doing is looking at how do we go ahead and bring a global community of millions of active customers, tens of thousands of governments that have gone ahead and engaged with our cloud services organization, while also our retail side, to bring this expertise to all the Americas. We've had teams over the past 6-9 months working already with government so that we can go ahead and respond. And I'll close on one that we're very closely working with. And again, it's where we bring our other partners together. Drone Deploy is an organization that goes ahead and helps map the images by which the drones take to the geospatial information. So very rapidly in scenarios, whether that is in a disaster with a hurricane, earthquake, lava flows, and more, a government can launch drones up by this organization, map it very quickly to what the geography is, and be able to analyze in real time on cell phones, leveraging cloud computing in those times. And we're helping governments understand how to do that today. And so as we look forward on behalf of Amazon, not only is it being ready when the call comes in to help governments, nonprofit institutions, non-governmental organizations, and more be ready to respond, but it's now how we're being proactive. And that's the journey ahead. And that's the part that we look forward to partnering and bringing that expertise and continuing our pattern and our heritage of listening to the customer, innovating on behalf, and helping them prepare in the resiliencies that will be needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kratz, and thank you for these examples of technology and how they helped strengthen your ecosystem to start with, your suppliers, your clients, but also to help with continuity so that you can rebuild from disaster quicker and have a resilient community. And Mr. Delgado from IDB, are there examples of partnerships that IDB has supported in the region? What are some of the successes that you can tell us about?
Thank you, Nadia. If you don't mind, I'm going to put a little bit of diversity here. I'm going to be speaking in Spanish. Buenas tardes a todos, muchas gracias. Es un placer estar con ustedes el día de hoy. Para responder la pregunta de Nadia, me gustaría utilizar como ejemplo la plataforma NDC Invest del banco. La plataforma NDC Invest es una ventanilla única con el que el banco busca apoyar a los países de una manera integrada en un solo lugar, que puedan obtener soluciones a sus retos de cambio climático, ya sea en adaptación o mitigación, de una manera más comprensiva y mucho más integrada. Si tengo oportunidad, un poco más adelante hablaré con detalles de la plataforma. Me voy a centrar en responder la pregunta. Primero, hay una cosa que es importante entender. La agenda de cambio climático en general, la agenda de adaptación y de resiliencia es particularmente grande. Es decir, no hay un solo actor que pueda ayudar a un solo país a cumplir sus metas y sus objetivos. Es decir, el problema es de tal dimensión que se requiere diferentes actores actuando de la misma manera y de manera más coordinada. Sin embargo, en realidad, lo que hemos visto en muchas ocasiones es que los donantes, las agencias bilaterales, los organismos multilaterales, tendíamos a trabajar de una manera más separada, de manera individual. Yo antes de empezar a trabajar en el IDB, trabajé por muchos años en el gobierno de México, siendo el punto focal para todos los organismos bilaterales y multilaterales en la Secretaría de Hacienda. Uno de los temas que más veíamos es que había una gran cantidad de donantes persiguiendo exactamente el mismo proyecto. Y por supuesto el mismo proyecto era el proyecto bueno, y sin embargo los grandes proyectos, aquellos que enfrentaban más problemas porque representaban una tecnología menos probada, un modelo de negocio no conocido, era lo que menos atracción ejercía. Y entonces en el BID nos hemos dado cuenta de reconociendo que esta es una realidad que estamos viendo en los países y también una demanda. Hemos empezado a trabajar de una manera más coordinada con nuestros donantes. Se han creado a nivel internacional diversas iniciativas para tratar de dar coherencia y coordinación en las intervenciones de los diferentes actores a nivel internacional. Uno de ellos, por ejemplo, es el NDC Partnership, con quien nosotros hemos trabajado de manera muy puntual. En algunos casos, por ejemplo, poner un ejemplo, ahora que estamos trabajando en Costa Rica, estamos haciendo dos trabajos en Costa Rica particularmente importantes. Uno tiene que ver más con la agenda de mitigación en términos de descarbonización, pero el otro es en la NDC para armar un plan de inversiones ligado a la SNC, tanto en intervenciones de mitigación como en adaptación. Los trabajos iniciales que el gobierno de Costa Rica realizó los hizo con un partner, no era el IDB. Sin embargo, el mismo partner en algún momento se dio cuenta que él no podía llevar este trabajo, y fue en ese momento que tanto el gobierno de Costa Rica como ese partner, que era el NDC Partnership, se acercaron con nosotros para encontrar la manera en que podíamos complementar estos trabajos, y lo que inició por ser un ejercicio solamente de entender el costo de la acción en términos de la EDC de Costa Rica se convirtió en un trabajo mucho más amplio entre diferentes actores, incluyendo nosotros, para crear un plan de inversiones de la NDC en ese país. Otro ejemplo importante, por ejemplo, que estamos haciendo es tratando de no realizar de realizar misiones conjuntas con otros organismos internacionales a los países, de tal manera que pueda haber una agenda más común, una agenda más complementaria entre las diferentes actividades que nosotros hacemos. Esto lo hemos hecho ya en varios países, pero por ejemplo, voy a hacer mención al caso de la de República Dominicana, en donde en particular, yendo de la mano con la Agencia Francesa de Desarrollo, lo que hemos hecho es armar una estrategia mucho más completa de adaptación en el trabajo, en donde la agencia francesa puede realizar ciertos tipos de inversiones, por ejemplo, en términos de adaptabilidad en las zonas costeras, y nosotros podemos prever el financiamiento para aquellas intervenciones que en esas zonas se requieren. Otro ejemplo, un poco más cercano, recientemente hemos estado en diálogos con la OEA y con el gobierno alemán para encontrar un mecanismo en el cual recursos provenientes de donación del gobierno alemán puedan bajar a través de la OEA, pero el brazo técnico de las intervenciones pueda ser el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. Estamos bastante avanzados en ese diálogo. Y este es solamente por poner algunos de los ejemplos que a nivel internacional cómo nos estamos coordinando, pero también una parte importante tiene que ver la manera en que los países se coordinan hacia adentro. Una quizá de las lecciones más importantes que hemos aprendido durante la implementación de las estrategias nacionales de cambio climático, de las NDCs, es que hay ejercicios donde las metas, donde los objetivos se plantearon liderados por ciertos ministerios, sin embargo, aquellos actores que son relevantes para poder cumplir con esas metas no fueron consultados. No es todos los casos, pero ciertamente es algo que vemos de manera repetida en la región. Y entonces, por ejemplo, uno no consultó al sector privado para entender si la tecnología para alcanzar las metas era factible de que ellos invirtieran en ella, si existían barreras para la introducción de esa tecnología o simplemente existían los mecanismos para su financiamiento en el país. O, por ejemplo, un tema que constantemente vemos es que no necesariamente hay coordinación entre las intervenciones que quieren realizar los ministerios sectoriales y la disponibilidad de recursos presupuestarios. Y entonces, en el marco de la plataforma Disinvest, precisamente lo que estamos haciendo es aprovechar esas lecciones aprendidas para que construyamos, por ejemplo, planes de inversión, ayudemos a los países a construir planes de inversiones ligados a sus estrategias de adaptación y de resiliencia, vayan acompañado con el diálogo correcto, con el actor correcto que puede darle viabilidad a la parte financiera de esas intervenciones. Con esto, Nadia, terminaría.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delgado. And I'd like to ask the panelists another question. We've heard a lot. We have with us people that work with innovation every day. What are some of the innovative approaches that you've seen that could help scale up these partnerships toward resilience? And Mr. Fox?
I believe that some of the most useful, Nadia, is really nothing very elegant, but it's how we share information. And Jeff mentioned it. These types of platforms allow us to rapidly converse with the different multi-stakeholder parties. I think it's the most important part. Certainly in avoiding what was mentioned about silo-type approaches, if we can draw connections between the little world of civil aviation and all of the humanitarian partners and have some shared strategies following a sudden onset disaster, having the vehicles by which to communicate, like you mentioned cloud servers, for instance, having the information readily available on a cell phone, can make a world of difference.
Thank you. And Mr. Anthony, what would be your recommendation to public policy decision makers to help scale up these partnerships?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. I mean, we've seen how effective those partnerships can be in terms of helping to promote resilience. And I think certainly from public policy perspective, I think it would be important for them to be able to provide the required leadership at the country level and making sure that you bring as many people on board. So there needs to be an effective consultative process that brings in all the relevant stakeholders in decision making. So for example, in the context of, again, the CRIF, the organization that I represent, you know, we introduced this issue of insurance in a very significant way in the governments. But prior to that, there was really hardly a culture of insurance or risk transfer. And so we've seen that in the 11 years that we've been in existence, we've seen that there's been a significant shift in the ground in terms of how government views insurance in terms of helping it to address the issue of disaster risk. And so what it really requires is for us to be able to bring all the relevant agencies on board. So typically, for example, while the main agency that we deal with in the government would be the Ministries of Finance, we've encouraged them, for example, to bring into the discussion, for example, even decisions such as deciding what type of policy to buy, how much insurance to purchase, what should be the level of the deductible, you know, what should be at the exhaustion point, all these issues and so on. We have now bringing the relevant agencies, such as, for example, we have the disaster management agencies in all the countries. Then you have agencies in countries such as the Met Office. We also have the department or agency responsible for sustainable development. So, you know, we bring all of those agencies in the decision-making process. So at the end of the day, once a decision is made on what policy should be purchased by a particular country, it would receive the acceptance of all. I will say very quickly that that was not the case when the CRIF was started. In fact, it was really simply a relationship between the CRIF and the Ministries of Finance, and that did create a certain amount of I guess, frustration and antagonism, and to the point that you find that a number of those agencies, such as the disaster management agencies, did not embrace the product. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony. Mr. Slayton, you've given us a great example of how you you've been able to build a platform where you have private sector actors that are going to be engaged in responding to disasters. What are some of the barriers that you've had to encounter to bring about that collaboration? And what are some of the barriers that you see coming in implementing this collaboration? How are you going to face them? In a minute or so we can open it up for questions.
Yes. Well, and I think to really paraphrase what we've just heard, it's all about communication. It's all about beginning to build a relationship of trust. The biggest barrier for government and private sector to talk is really all around language. We come from different worlds, and we need to come up with a common language where we can understand each other, what our equities are in responding to a disaster, and then creating a trusting platform like we're doing in Puerto Rico, where we're literally building a table that we can invite everybody to, so that we can learn where their interests lie in the private sector, what the requirements of government are, and then see where we can build together and bridge those challenges.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson, you've talked about how you reach out to communities to build awareness using technology. I'm curious to hear your experience engaging gender and inclusion, how that affected some of that awareness and the deployment of the technology.
Thank you, Nadia. So that's an interesting question. I think one of the ways in which we at Noaa have been successful with the Weather Ready initiative in particular is through citizen engagement and being able to give capabilities to the local citizens. So we have a very popular initiative called the Storm Ready or Storm Ambassadors that we have and also our Skywarn spotter system. These are grassroots type of initiatives that we've put into place where citizens are able to actually provide information directly to Noaa about local weather conditions, for instance. That empowers them to not only feel as though they have a sense of involvement in getting information out to their own communities and being sort of the eyes on the ground. You know, our radar coverage can only see so much. Our satellites can only see so much. But having that, having those Skywarn spotters on the ground is one way in which, and we're doing that. And I think, you know, perhaps to the point about gender inclusion, I think, you know, we see the interest, you know, across, you know, all the genders, and that this is not just something that is a male-oriented endeavor, or you know, certainly it is something that we aspire to ensure that that there's the proper training in place for citizens to feel as though they are part of this overall effort in helping to build resiliency at their communities and to make their communities weather ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carlson. And the next question, before we open it to questions from the audience, is to the World Bank and IDB, and our work in resilience firsthand. What would a resilient country, city, community look like in the future if it was a perfect world? I will start with Mark.
It's a hard question because there's so many definitions of resilience, in fact. And I think we hear a lot of common themes here of communication and integration. So how do we integrate data, being able to flow efficiently? How do we integrate language from, let's say, private sector, public sector, different groups within the ecosystem of actors? And ultimately, from an investment perspective or an infrastructure perspective, how is it that we can move forward, particularly at the city level, from sectoral approaches to urban development and risk and resilience to spatial perspectives? And what I mean by that concretely is if we take an objective of supporting a system of solid waste management, making it more efficient, more energy efficient, the ability to take and recycle some of the waste, that in itself is an important intervention. But if we're thinking of solid waste management from the broader perspective of the knock-on implications it has on flood risk management and the need to ensure that there is efficient solid waste management collection so that drainage systems and the broader flood protection system of a city is taken care of, then we're both addressing the solid waste management issue and the drainage and the flooding issue. So if we, instead of looking specifically at the solid waste management system and instead think about that flood protection system, then we have to understand, especially if we're dealing with a coastal city, the sea level rise implications with climate change and the storm surge implications. We have to understand the dynamics probably from riverine flooding from that system to the coastal system, and to think about when there's a connection between the two that drives additional flooding. We need to understand the nature-based solutions of both upstream and the afforestation objectives, as well as downstream, looking at mangroves and coastal protection. So it's this package of investments that come together to solve that single problem of flooding.
Delgado?
Gracias, Claudia. Voy a tratar de evitar no tocar exactamente los mismos temas que Mark, entonces responderé la pregunta desde otra perspectiva. Más me quiero centrar, hay un tema que es común y que vemos constantemente entre inversionistas que quieren hacer inversiones, por ejemplo, en infraestructura sostenible. Uno de esos temas es que no hay ni consistencia, ni definiciones, ni metodologías comunes para que definan qué es infraestructura infraestructura sostenible. Creo que un tema importante para todos, tanto para las agencias, los organismos financieros internacionales como a los inversores institucionales, es empezar a trabajar en una definición común de qué nos referimos cuando hablamos de que la infraestructura es sostenible. Y esto es precisamente parte del trabajo que estamos haciendo en el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, uniendo diferentes actores interesados, entre ellos el sector privado, para encontrar definiciones comunes que sean aplicables y que sean lo suficientemente flexibles para poderlos aplicar a las circunstancias particulares de cada país. En el caso, por ejemplo, lo estamos haciendo en diferentes países, que en el caso de México, por ejemplo, en el Sistema Nacional de Inversión Pública, estamos ayudando al gobierno de México a crear una definición única, una terminología única y una metodología también para cómo determinar qué infraestructura cumple con estas definiciones. Por supuesto, es solamente parte de la agenda, pero es importante porque eso puede darle mucho más consistencia y mejor foco a cierto tipo de inversiones que de otra manera no podrían llegar. Un caso de ellos particulares, por ejemplo, los bonos verdes. Los bonos verdes necesitas saber exactamente en dónde estás invirtiendo y cuál es el tipo de resultados que va a dar para que efectivamente haya interés en los inversionistas en financiarlo. Entonces, sin entrar en lo mismo, creo que esto es algo más complementario, una de las acciones.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. And my last question is to Mr. Kratz. Amazon has been, you've told us about how successfully you've engaged to build with communities to build resilience. What would be your recommendation to decision makers to help engage other actors from the private sector successfully as well?
I think that the biggest part is twofold. One is to really explore the art of the possible. When we think about technology and the rapid rate by which it's being developed, not only is it having a common language, as was referenced by many of my esteemed panelists, but it's also building in for the innovation that is there. If we think about the average cell phone that each of us are probably carrying in our pocket right now, that has between 8 and 12 times the compute power by which originally it took the United States to put a man on the moon. How do we go ahead and leverage that on behalf of citizens to go ahead and use that to help prepare, to be aware, and then to be able to go ahead and respond? So the first part is very much to go ahead and help educate on what technology can do today. In big data analytics, in open data sources, as we've mentioned earlier. I mean, I applaud Noaa posting up all of the data that they have accumulated on weather available now in open data sets so that any government, a startup, or other commercial entities can go ahead and have access to it, not having to reinvent the wheel, again, leveraging technology. But if you're not aware of what's available, it's hard to go ahead and think about the practical uses. The second part is really reaching out to the broader community of stakeholders, especially in the private industry, that are here to go ahead and help. Again, I'll go back to organizations like Drone Deploy that go ahead and have done amazing things to be able to help governments respond in times of need. Or those like Digital Globe. There's another organization that loads up petabytes of geographic photos and then enrolls citizens around the world to go ahead and tag those photos so that the machine learning can go ahead and be ready when the next issue comes apart. And so the two big areas that I encourage, one is to go ahead and learn what's possible today. What can technology go ahead and bring? But then the next step is that implementation. Technology for technology's sake won't help us get ready. Technology implemented through multi-stakeholders that want to go ahead and participate will go ahead and help us be able to not only prepare for what may come tomorrow, but when tomorrow comes, that we'll all be ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kratz. And we'll open it now for questions to the panelists.
Thank you, Chair. Since member states, with your permission, I'm usually sitting up here, but since I'm here, I'm going to take the opportunity to, to ask. And I believe that in terms of partnerships and in terms of where we are and what we're trying to do with member states, very often what we see is member states sometimes are not in a position to truly take advantage of the opportunities that are available from private sector partners. And so my question is, what kind of technical capacity, institutional capacity building programs that your organizations or your institutions may have to offer member states in terms of helping to build that capacity so that they can better partner with you? Thank you.
So let me maybe kick off what we're planning to go ahead and do on that one. We really are breaking it down into 4 core areas. One is that there's going to be, similar to what we've done with cybersecurity, a host of white papers that jointly we're going to go ahead and publish so that no matter what the size of the nation, no matter what the conditions of learning from a global community of governments who are facing similar challenges today. And that's one that I think will go ahead and help expand the reach of the art of the possible, but also how a global community is going ahead and tackling some of the challenges that every member nation will face. Second is that we're hosting a variety of webinars that are available in multiple languages to go ahead and show, to go ahead and demonstrate what others have gone ahead and done. Some of the examples that I mentioned today, coupled with a variety of others. Third is that we're putting at the behest of government the technology available to go and explore and innovate at no charge. Being able to go ahead and have Internet of Things technology, machine learning, storage, and more, so that governments can explore and innovate, they can learn, but then we're also providing the training that goes along with that. And last but not least is that we're preparing our teams. So internally, we've begun a process to go ahead and not only certify against the standards by which an international community holds, but having teams, Go teams, be able to be ready so that when the call comes and if one of the members says, we need Amazon to help, what happens next? How do we help have the teams be deployed on the ground for multiple weeks? We will still pay our people. That's not a question. We've decided that a long time ago. But to be able to bring the experts in communications, infrastructure, networking, and more, to be able to be boots on the ground to go ahead and help. Now, it's with organizations, it's with international communities and more. But as we look to expand, that's where we're getting started. But where I'd also go ahead and ask back is give us homework. Go ahead and give us ideas for how we can help you. How do we help go out to the Amazon Partner Network, tens of thousands of other companies that are involved in implementing technology so we can galvanize more to go ahead and help these organizations here around this room to be ready. Those are some of the areas that we're starting.
Anyone else from the panel would like to take the question?
Solamente comentar muy brevemente que el tema de fortalecimiento de capacidades es quizá uno de los retos más importantes que tenemos. Además del financiamiento, el fortalecimiento de capacidades es clave o de otra manera no vamos a ver el nivel de transformacionalidad o la replicabilidad de los proyectos. En lo que estamos haciendo precisamente con Endis Invest trata de abordar parte de esa problemática. Lo que hacemos es ayudar a los países proveyendo technical assistance en capacidades, en fortalecimiento de capacidades a lo largo del circo completo de preparación de proyectos, desde la parte de planeación institucional, de política pública, de estrategia, hasta el acompañamiento en el diseño específico de los proyectos con los estudios de preinversión, hasta generar las capacidades de absorción de financiamiento externo, en este caso de diferentes actores, no solamente del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo.
Thank you. We have a question from Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you very much, Chair. Lots of information from the panel. Mr. Fox, I heard with interest the whole thrust for the development in terms of the sustained engagement with the ports. From your position and so on, what is your take on the level of engagement with airports as well as seaports, but more specifically airports, in terms of the disaster management community, as opposed to we've seen that ports are very engaged with the security community, very security conscious, etc., and so on. And there's sometimes within the region, for example, for the Caribbean and so on, limited engagement with the disaster management community in relation to international airports when they have to do their periodic full-scale exercises, etc. There's a lot of talk around airports being brought back online, basically to function as logistic hubs in terms of humanitarian aspects from natural hazards, traditional natural hazards. But with the region now moving forward and exploring now its capabilities to deal with more so anthropogenic hazards, such as hazmat situations and seaburn incidents, and looking at the capabilities, this has serious consequences for small island developing states, as a lot of these ports, the airports, etc., seaports, they represent a considerable portion of the GDP. And with those particular types of hazards, you may, depending on the nature of the situation and the particular material involved, have somewhat the extended lack of use of that particular facility or the loss of it entirely, depending on the nature of the incident. So I know that there has been some preliminary engagement with the airports and disaster management community over the past couple of months, but in terms of going forward and developing that zero-hour capability and to manage particular incidents and determining how that can impact not only the loss of life and so on, but the protection of those particular considerable investments.
Thank you for that question. It is a very good question. And to be perfectly honest with you, in a lot of member states, there is a disconnect between the disaster management authority and the airport community. And I'll cite just a couple of examples. I mentioned the initiative that's gone on in getting airports ready for disaster. This is a reach out that's made by a combination of OCHA, the United Nations Development Program, and also our partners in DHL. So as they reach out to potential airports to do these types of assessments on getting them ready for disasters and conducting the workshops and building a more resilient response, sometimes they have issues in just knowing who to contact at the airport. And that has artificially restricted their engagement. I'll give you another example, something that we're involved in, and there was a speaker previously from PAHO. With the emergence of Zika, we created within both between the World Health Organization and ICAO what we called a vector control registry. In other words, what measures are being implemented at airports to control disease vectors, namely insects. Well, we created the register, we did a reach out through our partners, through the Airports Council International that represent airports internationally. But I have to say, some of the most vulnerable states didn't respond. And in fact, quite a few states, both developed and developing states, didn't respond. So one of the things that we've explored on the way forward with this notion of a focused task force for airport efficiency is that we may need to take a look at what international standards, in other words, what regulatory framework is there available and what guidance material is available to the airport community. So we may need to provide a little motivation in the terms of regulatory framework, but we also need to provide the tools, and I think through the partnerships, raise the awareness of the airport community on the importance of them engaging with the disaster management authorities, the national disaster management authorities, but also the engagement that we're having today is very important. There also has to be a concomitant reach out on the part of your national authorities to your airport communities. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have a question from the representative of Canada. Oh, Colombia first. It was Canada first. Colombia.
Sí, muchas gracias. Yo quiero resaltar varias cosas y hacer una sugerencia respetuosa. Primero, es muy bueno ver cómo ha progresado enormemente el tema de la academia. Anteriormente, cuando la academia presentaba propuestas, al final había una conclusión que decía hay que hacer un estudio más profundo. Hoy no, hoy la academia está muy pragmática, muy buena y nos entrega una serie de estudios maravillosos. Veíamos esta mañana a la representante de West Indies de la universidad, de todo lo que ya se está haciendo de una manera muy pragmática. Y en segundo lugar, vemos cómo las personas operativas cada vez están más involucradas en la planeación de la gestión del riesgo. No hay que desconocer que este tema, gracias a estas reuniones, ha avanzado enormemente. Les decía ahorita Jeff Kratz que diéramos ideas de cómo se podía trabajar en unos temas de la empresa privada, ¿no? Yo hago una respetuosa sugerencia. 31 de marzo del 2017 vino una avenida torrencial en una ciudad que se llama Mocoa, en Colombia, y más de 300 personas perdieron la vida. Esa misma avenida torrencial, casi igual en precipitación, sucedió el 12 de agosto, hace un mes larguito. Y gracias a un sistema de alerta tempranas que Colombia había montado, 0 personas perdieron la vida, no hubo heridos graves ni desaparecidos. La sugerencia respetuosa, trabajemos en sistemas de alerta temprana. Hay mucho que hacer en la parte privada, monitoreos satelitales, monitoreos con drones, monitoreos de diferentes maneras que nos pueden ayudar enormemente, y todos nuestros países tenemos eso. Si monitoreamos las cuencas debidamente en la parte alta, de una manera técnica y de avanzada, nos pueden ayudar muchísimo. Aprovechando que usted nos dio la oportunidad, puedo hacer esta sugerencia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And we have another question from the representative of Antigua and Barbuda.
Yes, just for a point of clarification, you had indicated, Mr. Fox, you had indicated earlier that when disasters happen, you all, ICAO would have a database as to which airports are open. I was just wondering, so on, does that database also include supplemental information as to the type of activities, etc., that are located within the immediate vicinities that can impact those international airports, for example, because within the small island developing states, we know that we have the majority of our critical infrastructure is coastal. We also have a zone that gets tornadoes, and they do come on land and have the potential to actually impact other facilities, not just the airport, but those in immediate facilities. And in our cases, because of our small geographical size, we do have critical other industries and so on that have the potential that, if impacted, can lead to a lot of these other long-term scenarios. So I was just wondering and so on if that database that you have would actually reflect that supplemental information, or is that something, a point that needs to be worked on?
Thank you. Another good question. The database that we have right now is a collection of information that comes from member states called Notices to Airmen. The Notices to Airmen system is really oriented to the airport infrastructure and operations. So the NOTAM system as it exists today, it can notify the community beyond aviation of whether or not an airport is opened or closed. In the Caribbean, following the hurricanes last year, in order to reduce the number of operations to just humanitarian relief flights, the Caribbean really led the way in issuing notices to airmen that restricted operation to humanitarian relief flights. We want to take that the next step and start to say, okay, if you want to come into this airport, and we can issue this by NOTAM, you have to have a prior authorization. And then connecting the humanitarian community together with the aviation community so that the National Disaster Management Authority can say, this is the type of priorities that we have. We need search and rescue. then we can work with aviation on how those prior authorizations are issued. Now, the environment around the airport, I'm afraid we don't have that information, but it's a database. And once you have a database, you're open to innovation. You're open to exploring the technology and reaping what our existing technology can do. So is it possible to link that information? Absolutely. It just takes some creative minds.
We have a question from the representative of Canada.
Merci beaucoup, Nadia. J'aimerais d'abord te remercier pour ton excellent rôle comme modérateur ou modératrice de panel et aussi notre conférencier invité pour leur participation. The presentations have been very informative. I don't have a question, but I have a couple of a comment and an announcement related to the vision or the approach of Canada on working together, which has been kind of like the theme of this panel. So as colleagues might know, Canada this year has the presidency of the G7 group of countries, and we have recently a summit in Charlevoix, Quebec, where one of the key topics that Canada put forward was working together on climate change, oceans and clean energy. So as a result of that meeting in Charlevoix and the discussions among the members, there was a document called the Charlevoix Blueprint for Healthy Oceans, Seas and Resilient Coastal Communities, which promotes the sustainable development of oceans and fisheries and commits to increase the availability of and the sharing of science and data to support resilient coast and coastal communities. As we speak right now, the Ministers of Environment and Energy of the G7 countries are meeting in Halifax, Nova Scotia, to continue the discussions on this issue. And again, it's kind of the approach of everybody working together towards the same goal, as opposed to be each country, each government, or each organization trying to do their own thing separately. So in partnership with the G7 countries and other partners around the world, Canada will continue to push forward this agenda and also to explore innovative financing approaches and tools and to build on existing platforms for governments, industry, philanthropists, and institutional investors, so everybody can come together and contribute what they're doing in those fields. And the announcement that I wanted to make is about a conference that Canada is going to be co-hosting with Kenya, and the conference will be on sustainable blue economy, and this is going to take place in Nairobi on the 26th and 28th of November. I want to invite member states of the OEAs to look into attendance at this conference that will look into identifying how to harness the potential of the blue economy, how to create jobs and combat poverty and hunger through the exploitation of, or the sustainable exploitation of our oceans, and show how economic development and healthy waters are not mutually exclusive, but can go hand in hand, which is an important vision that Canada has been promoting around the world. Also capture commitments and practical actions that can be taken today in order to address the issues of our oceans, and to bring together the players needed to transition to a blue economy. We hear today that the private sector, for instance, will be interested in to know more examples of how they can contribute to addressing these issues. Well, at this conference, you are going to have probably 4,000 participants that are going to be full of ideas from different sectors, government, private sector, and so on and so forth. And I think that this will be a good opportunity to get together and find ways to collaborate and a lot of good ideas, and particularly with representatives, high-level representatives from governments that are very interested in moving forward with this agenda. So that was my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that information and for the great initiative. I see that there are no more questions coming up. Great. And I just want to ask my fellow panelists if they have a last comment or observation. Great. Well, we've heard that today a lot about partnerships, but particularly about how leveraging knowledge to implement new tools of resilience, sharing knowledge, and formalizing collaboration and preparedness for disaster is going to be key for successful partnerships. Building a learning agenda, we've heard that as well, raising awareness using technology as a bridge to forge partnerships, but also being practical when thinking about innovation so that it lands in a very successful way. So with that, I'd like to thank my fellow panelists and for a wonderful and thought-provoking discussion. And we hope that this discussion was helpful to the member states as they look forward in the next few years, building the framework to promote innovation, scale up, and leverage multi-stakeholder partnerships to build the resilience in our region. Thank you very much.
Just to let member states know, we're not going to take a break. We're going to go right into the summary discussion so that we can get out of here a little earlier than we had anticipated. So if you'd remain in your seats, the chair will take her seat, and then we will continue with the summary and the closing. Thank you.
Toco otra vez aquí. Ya. Bueno, después de intervenciones tan estimulantes que nos señalan los aspectos que deben todavía afinarse para potenciar una acción multiactor, las oportunidades que se abren para generar mayores sinergias, las conectividades que en muchos casos por sentido común o por azar se han establecido, de conocer la importancia de la centralidad del conocimiento y de contar con información para la gestión de desastres y de conocer esquemas operativos dotados de gran pragmatismo para prevenir y solucionar los grandes retos ligados a la prevención de desastres y a la atención de desastres. Me permito abrir la 10ª y última sesión plenaria de este encuentro y siguiendo el formato de ayer, me complace ahora ceder la palabra al maestro Jesús Chucri Yacomán Zapata, director general de Organismos y Mecanismos Regionales Americanos de la Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores de México y presidente de la Junta Directiva de la Agencia Interamericana de Cooperación y del Desarrollo, para que nos presente su informe de relatoría, resaltando las principales ideas y recomendaciones presentadas en los paneles del día de hoy. Por favor, señor Yacomán.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. El día de hoy iniciamos hablando de cómo la organización ha contribuido a fortalecer la política de gestión de desastres naturales, principalmente mediante la cooperación. Se hizo un énfasis en que el tema sea una prioridad para las Américas desde hace ya varios años. Asimismo, se señaló la existencia de varios instrumentos interamericanos para atender el tema de desastres causados por fenómenos de origen natural. La OEA contribuye a fortalecer la cooperación multilateral en materia de prevención y gestión de riesgo de desastres a fin de alcanzar la resiliencia en nuestro hemisferio. También se habló de que la resiliencia en las Américas es una experiencia compleja y dolorosa. Se celebró que se lleve a cabo esta reunión para poder compartir experiencias y buenas prácticas y pensar cómo este intercambio de ideas permitirá contar con un sistema de prevención más robusto y coordinado entre toda la región. Será necesario que propuestas provenientes de la academia cuenten con apoyo financiero. El sector relacionado con la ciencia y la tecnología contribuye de manera permanente a contar con ideas e innovación en materia de reducción de riesgos y de desastres. Se mencionó al acelerador del Caribe como un ejemplo interesante que crea resiliencia. Se habló nuevamente de Cooperanet como una plataforma adecuada para el intercambio de experiencias. Las alianzas academia, sociedad, gobiernos es vital para la reducción de riesgos y también se dijo que era importante profundizar en el significado de la resiliencia. La resiliencia debe ser vista como un fenómeno holístico y dejar de pensar en la resiliencia de manera fragmentada. Para ello es necesario identificar y priorizar aquellos sectores que hacen una comunidad más vulnerable, tales como los temas hídricos, de energía, de transporte, de salud, entre otros. La resiliencia es un término que se ha puesto de moda, pero que necesitamos saber qué es y qué significa. Cada país debe definir qué es la resiliencia con esta visión holística, más allá de los desastres naturales, incluyendo sus componentes y con una visión de mediano y largo plazo. Se mencionó también que la falta de planeación del territorio y la ausencia de instrumentos que aseguren la tenencia de la tierra son elementos que aumentan la vulnerabilidad de las comunidades de la región. Pensar en cómo insertar al sector privado no solo para construir resiliencia, sino también para reducir vulnerabilidad es una responsabilidad social que no debe darse por la buena voluntad del sector privado, sino que debe reflejarse en la legislación. También se comentó que es un desafío conciliar los instrumentos internacionales de la OEA con los subregionales y globales. Se reiteró que el reto principal no es siempre la falta de recursos, sino que es un tema de coordinación y planificación. La OEA permite la construcción de consensos y avanzar en materia de cooperación en este tema. Se destacaron instrumentos como la Red Interamericana de Mitigación de Desastres, creada desde 2007 para compartir buenas prácticas y experiencias entre los Estados miembros. Se destacó el papel esencial del voluntariado en la ayuda humanitaria, así como en la capacitación de organizaciones comunitarias. Se dijo que es necesario que las comunidades y sus organizaciones se empoderen, involucrar a la sociedad civil para que pase de ser víctima a ser actor clave de la resiliencia mediante un modelo participativo y horizontal con el uso de plataformas digitales y nuevas tecnologías. También se dijo que debemos de ir de lo local a lo nacional para después poder pasar a lo regional, priorizando la colaboración y la cooperación. Tenemos una región diversa con muchos tipos de vulnerabilidades, pero esto no debería distanciarnos. Ninguna solución es suficiente si no trabajamos juntos. Se volvió a hacer mención, igual que el día de ayer, que el PIB per cápita en el hemisferio sufren modificaciones a partir de los efectos de desastres naturales. Los desastres naturales contribuyen a profundizar las desigualdades sociales. La reducción de riesgo de desastres debe ser entendida como un elemento de lucha contra la pobreza. Se habló mucho también de la cooperación en materia de capacitación y formación de recursos humanos para gestionar los sistemas de prevención y de respuesta a desastres. Se comentó que conviene invertir en medidas estructurales a fin de evitar la mayor cantidad de vidas humanas, la pérdida de la mayor cantidad de vidas humanas mediante las alianzas público-privadas. Otro reto es la comunicación sobre el riesgo, al fin de que la población sepa qué se puede hacer y que se tenga conciencia del fenómeno en cuestión. Reducir la vulnerabilidad institucional mediante mecanismos que permitan medir sus avances de manera transparente. También algunas delegaciones señalaron la importancia de generar mecanismos para ampliar la cooperación en esta materia, sobre todo para los pequeños estados insulares. Algunas delegaciones destacaron el papel de la mujer y su empoderamiento a fin de construir resiliencia, y la resiliencia debe entenderse desde el contexto del desarrollo sostenible y de la seguridad humana. Los gobiernos deben crear espacios fiscales que permitan la inversión en la generación de resiliencia, reduciendo así su peso en la deuda. Por último, entramos al tema de la importancia de una reingeniería institucional de las oficinas de gestión de riesgo de desastres y la necesaria inclusión de los sectores público, privado, académico y sociedad civil, que requiere transversalizar sus esfuerzos en el tema de la reducción del riesgo de desastres. Se subrayó la importancia de trabajar en los países con la parte focal. El cambio climático es un tema fundamental en las Américas en materia de resiliencia, adaptación y mitigación. Los países del Caribe están demostrando que se puede llevar a cabo acciones concretas. Las decisiones para la reducción del riesgo de desastres deben ser apoyadas en información científica. Para ello es necesario crear infraestructura y conocer las tecnologías disponibles en los países a fin de crear modelos predictivos. Los modelos deben surgir de las propias experiencias de desastres y de estudios técnicos científicos altamente especializados. Se destacó la importancia de construir resiliencia en el sector salud. Hoy en día, en muchos mecanismos con alcance mundial y un plan de acción regional con métricas establecidas para identificar avances es necesario. Se requiere mejorar la infraestructura, así como integrar modelos de análisis de riesgo que permitan generar información científica y datos de calidad armonizados para la toma de decisiones y la creación de modelos predictivos. La resiliencia tiene una importancia crítica porque los costos generados por los desastres se han incrementado en los últimos años. Se mencionaron ejemplos sobre cómo las alianzas multiactores contribuyen a enfrentar de mejor manera la gestión de desastres y la ayuda humanitaria. La agenda del cambio climático y la construcción de resiliencia es demasiado amplia y ningún actor puede responder en aislamiento por sí mismo. Para crear alianzas es importante ser humildes en términos de entender y definir las ventajas comparativas de cada sector. Los requisitos financieros de la mayoría de los países de la región sobrepasan la capacidad de cualquier institución, por lo que es importante trabajar juntos. Se destacaron ejemplos de plataformas creadas para ofrecer a los gobiernos financiación y capacidad técnica de diferentes donantes. Los gobiernos deben ampliar su comprensión y manejo de proyectos e ir más allá de la financiación de donantes individuales, abordando así grandes proyectos que superen un solo donante. Los gobiernos deben asumir un papel proactivo e incorporar el uso de tecnología para garantizar la continuidad de las operaciones e informar a las comunidades afectadas en tiempo real. También se deben de compartir ejemplos exitosos de cómo la tecnología puede contribuir a la gestión de desastres en las Américas a fin de fortalecer a las comunidades. Se destacó la importancia del transporte aéreo como un motor para el desarrollo socioeconómico dentro de la región, en particular para el Caribe, y se señaló la necesidad de invertir en la resiliencia en infraestructura en el transporte aéreo. Ahí dejaría los principales puntos. Igual que la vez pasada, Presidenta, si hay alguna delegación que considere importante destacar algo que ahorita no comenté, estaremos atentos a recibir los comentarios y durante la próxima semana estaremos circulando a todas las delegaciones las relatorías de los 2 días. Muchas gracias.
Mil gracias, señor Giacomán, por la presentación de este informe. Quisiera preguntar a las delegaciones si tienen algún comentario o observación que agregar. Gracias. El representante de Unisdira. Tiene usted la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias. Sí, quería hacer un comentario en relación al espacio que provee la CIDI a los organismos de cooperación y alentarles a discutir la posibilidad de que puedan tener como eje de las discusiones a futuro el cumplimiento de la meta F del marco CIDI, que refiere a los organismos de cooperación y la cooperación en general alrededor de la reducción de riesgo de desastres, que tiene como meta el 2020. Es un espacio que creo el más adecuado por reunir a los gobiernos y a las instituciones especializadas en cooperación para ejercer esta valoración regularmente y proveerla como parte de este avance del marco CIDI en los foros que corresponden. Muchas gracias.
Muy bien, ¿algún otro comentario, observación? Brasil tiene la palabra. Señor representante, tiene la palabra.
Obrigado, senhora presidente. Minha delegação gostaria de expressar sua satisfação com os debates ocorridos nesta reunião. Durante 2 dias, tivemos a oportunidade de discutir os rumos da cooperação para o desenvolvimento prestada pela OEA e seu posicionamento num contexto marcado pela atuação de diversos outros importantes atores de cooperação. Trocamos também importantes ideias e experiências sobre a temática específica da cooperação para a criação de resiliência, desafio global que vem se manifestando com especial intensidade na região. Esta reunião não teria sido possível sem a preparação conduzida pela presidência da Junta Diretiva da Agência Interamericana de Cooperação, presidida pelo México, e pelo trabalho da Secretaria Executiva de Desenvolvimento Integral, CIDI. Evidentemente, a reunião não teria alcançado os resultados sem o engajamento de todas as autoridades de cooperação e de gestão de risco de desastres presentes nesta reunião, além das missões permanentes dos Estados-membros. Por esta razão, que o Brasil gostaria de propor uma resolução de agradecimento, que esperamos possa refletir os sentimentos de todos os Estados-membros aqui presentes. Com sua permissão, senhora presidente, eu gostaria de ler o texto da proposta de resolução. Sim? Bem, projeto de resolução, voto de agradecimento à presidência da 2ª reunião especializada do CIDI de Altas Autoridades de Cooperação. A 2ª reunião especializada do CIDI de Altas Autoridades de Cooperação, considerando o interesse e a acolhida dos participantes quanto aos temas da 2ª reunião especializada do CIDI de Altas Autoridades de Cooperação, que as autoridades de cooperação, as autoridades responsáveis pela gestão do risco de desastres, os representantes de organizações internacionais, o setor privado, as instituições acadêmicas e a sociedade civil tiveram a oportunidade de dialogar sobre o tema fortalecimento da capacidade de cooperação e das parcerias para o desenvolvimento e para o fomento da resiliência frente aos desastres, e intercambiar experiências e analisar a situação dos acordos existentes e a gestão da cooperação para o desenvolvimento. Com a liderança da presidência da Junta Diretora da Agência Interamericana de Cooperação e Desenvolvimento, tornaram possível a realização da 2ª reunião especializada do CIDI de Altas Autoridades de Cooperação, realizada em Washington, District of Columbia, em 20 e 21 de setembro de 2018 e contribuíram para o seu êxito. Resolve 1. Cumprimentar o diretor executivo da Agência Mexicana de Cooperação Internacional para o Desenvolvimento, a MECSID, embaixador Agustín García López, e a ele expressar seu reconhecimento pelo destacado trabalho como presidente da segunda reunião especializada do CIDI de Altas Autoridades de Cooperação. 2. Agradecer às altas autoridades de cooperação e aos organismos responsáveis pelos temas relativos à resiliência nas Américas, que nos permitem, com sua contribuição, iniciar um diálogo permanente nas duas matérias. 3. Expressar seu agradecimento aos funcionários da Secretaria Executiva de Desenvolvimento Integral, da Secretaria de Relações Exteriores do México, SRE, e à Missão Permanente do México junto à OEA, que, com seu profissionalismo, dedicação e eficiência, contribuíram para o êxito da segunda reunião especializada do CIDI de Altas Autoridades de Cooperação. Ponto. Obrigado, senhora presidente. Submeto então a consideração.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias. Doy la palabra ahora a Panamá, que nos ha pedido el espacio. Por favor, a la representante de Panamá. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, señora presidenta. Muy buenas tardes a todos los presentes. Nuestra delegación quiere apoyar la propuesta presentada por Brasil. Definitivamente, el reconocimiento que hacemos aquí, estamos seguros que lo compartimos por todos los presentes. Solamente quiero agregar un detallito. La versión en español, a diferencia de la que le llegó el delegado de Brasil, en el resolutivo, párrafo resolutivo 3, donde dice la Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores, habría que agregarle Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores de México, entre paréntesis CRE, porque en la versión en portugués está escrita de esa manera, para que sea coherente. Y después de este detallito, quisiera también solicitar su aprobación por aclamación. Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Con mucho gusto. Muy bien, con esto entramos en nuestra sesión de clausura, para lo cual me permito ceder la palabra a la señora Kim Osborne, secretaria ejecutiva del Desarrollo Integral de la OEA, para las observaciones conclusivas de este encuentro. Muchas gracias, señora Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. And before I proceed, I would like to ask for a round of applause for our provisional chair, who has done an amazing job in replacing the chair in his absence. So with your permission. Thank you so much, distinguished delegates. I believe all good things must come to an end. And I don't want to be the one to stand between you and happy hour. So I will try to make the closing as quick as possible. I think we had the amazing opportunity, a very packed, if not productive, agenda over the last 2 days to discuss and to engage with each other between and among member states, with our partners. We've looked at ways to solidify the partnerships, the cooperation that we have going on within the context of the OAS, as well as within the context of other organizations and entities. And we're very pleased that the notion, the idea of cooperación solidaria that we espouse to within the context of the OAS is very much alive and well. We are grateful to the participation of all our member states, those who traveled to join us here. We're extremely grateful for your presence, for enriching the dialogue that we engaged in this past 2 days, for the suggestions, the ideas, the comments, the criticisms, the what we can do better. That is what this dialogue is all about. It's about looking at our strengths, looking at the gaps, looking at the challenges, looking at the opportunities that we have for cooperation in the Americas. I like to say that within the context of the Americas, we are about over 1 billion people. So I like to imagine the power of 1 billion, so that we know that we have the capacity within this region almost for self-sufficiency, using the instrument, the tool of cooperation that we have from our member states. As we always say here, no country is too big or too small to give or receive cooperation. We truly believe that. And I believe as we go back to our respective capitals, it is important for us to all dig deep and figure out what are the lessons learned, what are the good practices, what are the offers that we have that we can share with each other so that we are collectively developing our region. I would like to take this opportunity in particular to thank the government of Mexico, in particular AMEXID, Dr. Ambassador Agustin Lopez, who joined us here this week, to Shukri Giacoman Zapata, without whom this would not be possible. We're so very grateful for the leadership of Mexico, for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for really taking up this issue and recognizing not only that we needed to have this meeting of cooperation authorities, but to include the issue of resilience within that context. And I know we only had a day to discuss it, but there's so many other aspects to resilience that we would like or we need to explore and to take seriously. I would like to thank our partners who made it possible, who traveled to be here, both the partners from the private sector, from academia, from foundations, from international organizations, who all thought it important to be in this space, recognizing that, again, we cannot do it alone. We need the partnership of everyone. We need the participation of all sectors, of all societies, if we're going to succeed in this quest of building resilient communities and economies. I would like to challenge us, though, that as we leave, we do not, after all the goodwill and the ideas that have flowed, the suggestions that have been made, that we really take seriously and we really begin to harness the power of partnerships, to harness the power of cooperation that exists, and to use this entity, the OAS, that member states participate in, that you really use that power, harness the power of the OAS, that power of convening, that power of collaborating, that power of cooperating between and among countries. I think it was very well said here many times that we are the only organization that has the participation of all the member states of the region. And I think that is an important element that we have to continue to use, to build upon, and to ensure that the reason why the OAS was created is not left hanging, that we really believe that within the context of these walls, that we have the power to effect change within our countries, if only we continue to build that solidarity between and among our countries. I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity, and I beg your indulgence, to recognize the staff of the Secretariat. I did not do this alone. I like to say I come here, and yes, I put in the hours, and yes, I drive a bad bargain, but I very much want, in particular this time, to recognize the staff of the Secretariat. Usually we go to countries for ministerials, and so the member states are the ones who organize everything. We come in and we have the discussions with the member states, but the staff of member states are the ones. So with your permission, I would like to recognize each person who really have worked hard. We left here, I left at 10 o'clock on Wednesday night. They were here until 11 o'clock, after 11. And so with each of you, I want you to come forward. I don't want to embarrass you, but I very much want to recognize you because it took great effort to pull all of this together. So Emily Tangarife, who's on the side. Emily, if you would please stand and take a bow. Claudia Salazar. And we have an intern who is, who's here with us from Spain. Where's Ariadna? And I just have to say, Ariadna served with us over the summer, and she asked to stay an extra month. And she will leave on Wednesday to go back to Spain. But you've worked so hard. You've worked so hard. I've seen you working. We don't want to abuse our interns, and I don't want to say this publicly, but we really have. You've really worked hard as an intern, and I hope you've learned as much as you've contributed to the Secretariat. Thank you so much. Luz Serrano, who's sitting there, Luz works on the Development Cooperation Fund, and this is a collective effort. And Tanya, who's sitting, Tanya Brooks, who's right here as well. Cleta Springer, who's been silently contributing as a rapporteur.